All right, welcome back to the Ottawa studios of Inside My Canoe Head. I am your host, Dr. D. Happy New Year. Welcome to 2025. What an incredible year it's going to be. Today, we're going to talk about those people who built our freaking society, and I am approaching that status soon, the seniors. What are preparedness consideration for seniors, and how, as we people who care about them, can help. Sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. It's 2025. Let's get after it. So I'm sure by now you've had the hangover, holdover, whatever. Hopefully, if you're one of those people that decided that it's a perfect and wonderful time to start some type of innovative, invasive change in your life as of 01 January, I hope it's going well for you. Listen, we appreciate everybody's feedback coming back into us at www.insidemycanoehead.ca. Everything they give us, good, bad, and different. We love it. It's great. Keep it coming. And when you drop over to the website, it gives you a whole bunch of things you can consider. Down the bottom, there is a reach out button to me, sends an email directly to me. I get it. I respond. Why? Because I've always said on this podcast that if I pretend to be anything other than what I am, you should absolutely shut me down. I'm there to listen to you. If you're going to listen to my podcast, I should give you direct access to me via email. So there it is. Please feel free. Reach out. Tell me what you think. People do, believe it or not. Some episodes receive none. Some episodes receive a dozen. There's just a flurry of activity depending on whose button I press. And periodically I get ones that say, hey, listen, I really appreciate it. It was a fantastic episode. It helped me out. But most of them really challenge the ideas that I put forward, which is a good thing. It's a good thing when people listen. It sparks something in their idea or in their cranium, and then they articulate it in an email to me, because that's how, number one, I understand the message that's being sent, and I understand how people receive it, but it's also helpful to everybody else to understand, hey, this guy actually listens. I know it's a novel in today's world, and in some big channels, you're lucky to get a little heart from the creator, and everybody goes, ooh, he loved my YouTube comment. Of course he does. It kicks the algorithm out again. Every time you like a comment on social media, every time you respond to a comment on social media, it kicks it back out in the algorithm, right? Maybe they're nice, or maybe they just understand how social media algorithms work. Either way, get after it. Tell me what you think. Support the podcast. Share it with somebody that you know. Help us out. Reach the message. This, as well as our writing on Substack and our incredible YouTube channel, as nascent as it is, will always be free. This is our public service providing rational, non-apocalyptic, evidence-based preparedness education for you. Non-apocalyptic, folks. I don't care what people think. Whether whoever gets sworn in this month, nothing bad is really going to happen. It's simply going to be a reorientation of priorities, but life will carry on. Now, and if there's any group of people who can support that idea, it's the seniors in our lives. And as we get medical advances and as we move further along our skill sets and knowledge base about the human animal, we are able to provide far more medical support to those in crisis, which means we get to keep our seniors a lot longer than we used to. We call it lifespan, but it's also quality of life. It's not just the fact that individuals are living more years, it's that there is more life in those years. And every senior I've ever met who's in their 70s will tell you almost to a person that it is about the quality of life, not about the number of years. If you live an exceptionally long period of time, but every day is a struggle and a discomfort and a pain, etc., it's not a huge quality of life. So when you have a senior in your life, or you are a senior, what does preparedness mean for you? What are the considerations other than the basics that we talk about in this podcast, that we have in our video course, that we have in our books, that's on our website? We talk about all of those things as regular, and they affect every human being on the face of this earth, whether you're 2 or 82. But there are very real considerations when you reach a senior age that need to be taken into account. Now, you can look at these comments and suggestions and offerings that I'm going to make today. Either you're looking through the lens of somebody who has a senior for who you're concerned about, or you're a senior yourself and you have some personal concerns. Either way, I'm going to make this worth your time. Now, the first number one thing is we have to accept that there are some reductions in life. This is sometimes somewhat difficult for a senior citizen to accept, that both there's going to be some cognitive and there's going to be some physical limitations. We'll talk about the physical limitations first. They're less emotionally challenging to discuss. As we age, and not everybody ages this way, but under normal conditions, your mobility and your ability to execute physical tasks start to go down. Where that becomes a concern for preparedness is when we start thinking about chaotic situations. And when chaos reigns and difficult things happen, you, because of a reduced physical mobility, are going to have challenges. For example, if you live on the 27th floor of a condo tower because, hey, why not? Because you earned it. You made that dough. You got the condo with the view. You're 27 stories up, and the fire alarm goes. And you have to walk down those stories, right? That's the question. Can you do that? And even more difficult, if the elevator is out for whatever reason or the power is out in the building, can you climb back up the 27 stories to where you live? And if you can't, you've just created a situation where your mobility is restricted and your ability to evacuate is somewhat impacted. And that's a very real concern for physical mobility in times of what we consider to be the most likely but least dangerous disaster event, which is a prolonged power outage. You know, if the power's out for half an hour, 45 minutes, nobody cares, you know? Take what's left, make yourself a cup of coffee with your battery-powered coffee maker or whatever you have, and sit back and relax. It'll be over soon. No big deal, right? And it really doesn't have a major concern. The major concerns when we're talking about 2, 3, 4-day power outages, and you're 27 stories up, and now you have a mobility concern. You're, for all intents and purposes, trapped in your residence. If you use a mobility scooter, right? Those the mobility chairs that you move, that you see a number of seniors moving around in that have a little seat on them. You sit down and rest as you get tired. And it's perfectly fine. My mother-in-law, God love her soul, God rest her soul, used to use one. My mother has one right now. How's that work on the stairs, my friends? I'm just going to throw that out there. How does that work on stairs for 27 stories? I know this. I have the concern, and it doesn't have to be 27 stories up. My mother right now lives in an 8-story apartment building. Okay? Well, she's on the 8th story. I think there's 11, but it doesn't matter. She can't get down the stairs. Full stop. There's no option for her to get down the stairs at any time, and there's no option for her to get up the stairs at any time. So if there is an evacuation of the apartment building, she can't go. Full stop. That's a reality in her mobility. So what does that mean? That means because I poked and prodded the bear, she's now registered as a vulnerable person at their vulnerable person index in the city that she lives, which means ideally and hopefully, I've been told, but I have no way to verify this, that the city fire department knows she's there. Right? And the city fire department is aware that there is a senior on the 8th floor of this building, that if they get a fire call and there is a need to evacuate, that she is unable to evacuate and she lives alone, right? So at least there's a bit of mitigation done there, but it's a very real consideration. My mother is vibrant, wonderful lady, has lived alone for 15 or 20 years or 20 years plus since her last child left. So the very real mobility restrictions that exist are also about weather related. So when you think about going out and about, like we're in the cusp of winter here in the city of Ottawa. We had some decent snow, and then we've had some rain. We're kind of in that disgusting period between 5 degrees Celsius and minus 5 degrees Celsius is the most difficult most difficult temperature range in which to operate outdoors, right? 28 years in the Army, I'll tell you that's absolutely true. Wet, cold, and nothing dries. The point being is that if you're out and your mobility restricted, or you're worried about increased levels of physical injury because of a fall outside, then it is a very real. My grandfather, God love him, God rest his soul, used to have a fold down pick on the end of his cane, because simply that. I mean, he was not very mobile, and if he went down outside, he would likely not make it out of the hospital, which is true with most seniors in their 80s and plus. So the point is that when you think about mobility, think about it through the frame of, can I get out of the residence on my own, or can your senior you care about get out of the residence they're in on their own? Do they have all of the equipment necessary and all of the support necessary to navigate outdoor spaces in different climactic conditions that would influence their ability to be mobile, right? So basically think and walk through what their mobility looks like and what that concern is, because it's very real, right? And we have to be sure that we understand that this is not about treating people like kids and telling them, do you have your walker? Here's your salt, here's your picks. It's about understanding that these individuals have very real concerns about mobility, and they have to address them. The next thing that we need to talk about is mental health conditions. Mental health conditions and the wider dementia. Alzheimer's is part of dementia. And dementia, as we know in modern day science, is really type 3 diabetes. So however you want to call it, when we see cognitive decline, and again, I've had experiences in my mother right now has mild stages of cognitive decline. And the issue that you have is that it is incredibly painful and incredibly difficult to watch such a vibrant, amazing human being who you've known your whole life start to have cognitive struggles and cognitive issues. Now, I use my family for example, but I know most of the listening audience can concur with somebody that they know. It's a difficult thing in preparedness because a lot of what we do in preparedness is thinking about and future-proofing, right? So preparedness is future-proofing. As cognitive decline happens, it is more difficult for an individual to think about what are the things that they need to be concerned about for events that have not occurred. And then when events do occur, what are the cognitive things they need to think about? And one of the things we went down with some family members is a list. Now, sometimes checklists can be a bit embarrassing and so whatever, but we put checklists down for things of concern. Remember to close the windows, remember to close the doors, remember to do this, remember to shut off the gas on the stove, remember to, whatever your concern may be related to cognitive decline, you have to make sure that the individual who, if they live alone, has some part of support mechanism to assist them. Because the big thing about it is, if you have to evacuate, will they know where to go? Now, that may seem crazy, but in realistic terms, somebody in cognitive struggle may not be able to identify the stairwell. Even if they're physically mobile enough, they may not be able to cognitively identify the stairwell and find out where they're going. Or when they come back up the stairwell, because that's not a familiar way of re-entering the floor, they may be uncertain where they're going. They may be uncertain which room theirs is or which door there is. And I mean, it sounds a bit ridiculous, but one of the things that holds the mind together at the beginning of cognitive decline is patterns, right? It's what we've always done. A lot of times it's a subconscious thing where I know I have to do the following things in order. This is just how I do them and how I've always done them. And because of that, the mind has a greater propensity to remember habitual, repetitive things than it does new, innovative ideas or one-off or two-off things that are stored in the cranium. So a lot of times habitual things are the same. And you will see people in cognitive decline will stick to their patterns, right? This is what I do every day. It's just how I choose to live my life. A lot of the times that may be because of their own internal cognitive struggle about what other options are out there. What else could they be doing? Where else could they be going? Who else could they be talking to? It's just understanding that that's going to be a real concern. The third thing that you need to worry about in related to their mental and their physical decline is weather. And when I mean about weather, I mean climatic control. So the gray-bearded Green Beret, which is a fantastic individual on YouTube, has really phrased it as thermal regulation of core body temperature. That's the key to shelter. That's what shelter provides for you in a survival scenario. It's thermal regulation of your core body temperature. And I give him credit for that saying all the time because I think it's brilliant. When we think about it that way, you and a younger in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and even in your 50s are far more robustly equipped to deal with climactic extremes, really cold weather and really hot weather. As you age and as you move into the senior world, you become less able for your body to manage the situation, right? Because your body is an amazing thing created by nature. And it has incredible internal capabilities to sweat and do other things to help regulate that core body temperature by burning fats and doing a whole bunch of other things. The difficulty is that becomes less useful and less helpful as you age. And so seniors are more susceptible to heat injuries and cold injuries from extreme temperatures. Now, 90% of people who listen to this podcast are in regions of the world that have access to air conditioning and heat, which is perfectly fine. So you're able to keep the climactic conditions appropriate for a senior as they age, no problem, big deal. When there's a power outage or a power disruption, and you're on that 27th floor and it's hot and humid out, an incredibly quick increase in temperature that is not dissipated inside that apartment can create some very real additional stresses on the human body, for which a senior's body may no longer be capable of mitigating, placing them at significant increased risk. And so part of the mitigation measures to consider is, how are you going to keep warm? Or how are you going to keep cool when you don't have access to power? I mean, it's something that we put in our book for basic preparedness, right? But it's a lot less of a concern for younger individuals. It is far more of a concern for the older individuals, right? Because if you're living on your own, there's only so much you can do waving a fan in your face, right? So how do you power a fan when the power's out? Well, they have battery-powered fans, or you can get a Jackery 500 like I have to plug mine into. But it's a consideration of, how am I going to maintain appropriate climactic conditions in the residence where I live if I'm a senior and I don't have access to power? That is a very real consideration that you have to undertake. And if you're taking care of a senior in advanced age, that's a concern that has to be addressed, because especially if you're not able or you're not in a position to go to them every time there's a disruption, right? Like, for example, I live some 800 kilometers away from my mother. Every time there's a power outage, I can't go. My sister lives in the city with her, but she works a full-time job. So she can't constantly go to my mother's place to turn on a fan or hook up all of these things. So we have to make those considerations ahead of time. We have to figure out the steps that are necessary to ensure that in the dead of winter, for an extended period of time, for 3 or 4 days, when there's no power and there's no heat in the building, how does my mother stay warm 8 stories up? And then move it around till August when it is 37 degrees Celsius and 100% humidity and the power's been out for 3 days. How does my mother stay cool? Very real, very important. You have to have the answer to that. So if you think about the environment, that it poses a threat through either physical, a cognitive, or a climactic consideration, you start to realize that it is more focused on the environment in which the senior lives. So sometimes, and we've always said this in our housing, we always talk about how everybody starts in an apartment, and then you move to a single family home, and then you move to a one-level home, and then a retirement home, etc. And a lot of times what we don't do now in today's society is we don't build housing for aging. I live in a 3-story townhouse, right? Everybody's smashed into this neighborhood, as many people as they can, to get the greatest profit out of the smallest square footage, right? There's a lot of people talking about intensification, high density living. I don't want to live on top of my neighbors, and I don't want my neighbors that close, but whatever. You may have a different feeling. Generally, right now, as a public policy initiative, we are not building housing for aging, right? Not only forget the fact that there is nowhere near enough properties for advanced age individuals and people who need slightly extra care in retirement homes. I'm talking about regular infrastructure, right? You can't consider an apartment 27 stories up for a mobility challenged senior as an appropriate retirement residence, right? I don't think so in the world of preparedness. When I look at it through that theoretical lens, I'm like, that is setting up too many additional concerns that now have to be mitigated. I would love to have that senior, or me when I'm a senior, in a 1-story bungalow with without a basement, right? A house on slab with a small little yard would be an absolute perfect place as a senior. So I have 1-level living, wide doors in case I need a wheelchair at some point, and then I can get out and access the backyard, the front yard, without having to go up and down steps, right? 1-level living. Therefore, the mobility concerns are largely removed. The environmental concerns, I have the backup, etc. We're not building residences to be robustly appropriate for our senior population. Now, that's a public policy that's worth an entire separate episode to talk about our housing strategy and how we're building housing. And right now, because we have such a housing crisis here in Canada and many other countries around the world that shows amazingly large levels of migration, what we have is that we're just smashing residents out to get residents on the books. We're not really sitting down and proactively deciding this is the type of housing we need, right? And I've often said that, what my European friends, and it's normal in Europe to, raise a family in a flat. That's just a perfectly normal thing to do. Here in North America, it's looked like, ooh, you're the poor people living in an apartment, right? It's just a culturally different idea. And so, but when we build apartment buildings here or condo towers, because they're more valuable, we build a whole bunch of 500 square foot studios and 650 square foot 1-bedrooms. What we need to be doing, arguably, and this is my little bit of a soapbox for today, is we need to be mandating that 30% of all apartments or condos built have 3+ bedrooms, right? Just to accommodate families living in them. Because then you can accommodate having a senior living with you. And this is the next point that I want to talk about is when you make the decision that it's appropriate for a senior to live with you, there are other considerations and you have to add them. So if you followed our process, it's available on our video course that's on for $199 Canadian, lots less American for the conversion. There's a chapter on seniors, but when you go back to the first couple of chapters, it talks about understanding family, right? Now, and some people have said that, of course I understand my family. I said, well, let's just go through the exercise of understanding who your family is and all the people that are likely to depend on you in times of crisis. Who are they? What are their concerns? And then as you move forward and start building preparedness plans in your trifecta of specific preparedness response plans, you're going to do it through the lens of the considerations. This is what you need to do when you have a senior that moves in with you that has mobility, cognitive, or other concerns, is that your ability to shelter in place changes, because there's very certain considerations you have to add to that list because of their restrictions. It could be medical restrictions. For example, you could have a senior that has very real needs for climate-controlled medication. And if you didn't have that built into your minimal acceptable power profile that we talk about in the video course, You may not have taken into account the wattage or the amperage necessary to maintain that climate control for their medications, which means it will influence your ability to provide the shelter in place animalistic requirements of food, water, shelter, health, safety, and security for all the people that are going to call to you in time of an emergency. So when you consider taking a senior into your home, which is an absolute brilliant experience, I did for a while, the point is that you have to make amendments to your existing preparedness plan, because you're not going to be able to evacuate in the same way. Or if you are evacuating, you'll have different evacuation concerns. You'll have different financial needs for your trifecta of preparedness plans. And then your shelter in place is likely going to look different. How do you manage the household? How do you do a number of different things are all going to be impacted. And I'm arguing positively here. I'm not saying it's a negative impact. I'm just saying it's a consideration you have to make. You can't just assume in the world of preparedness, when you add an additional human, whether that be a brand new infant or a senior to your household, that you just carry on with exactly the way you did before. It doesn't work like that, right? You have a new person in the house, and it's a privilege to do so. And you're going to have very real considerations when it comes to your preparedness plan. So just a quick check-in here. We covered the mental health, cognitive decline, the physical considerations, the climactic considerations, and we also had a quick chat about the additions of bringing people into the house. The other thing that is important is to understand seniors and cyber. And now seniors come from a generation of trust and belief. 40 years ago, it was very difficult for somebody to call you up and persuade you to write a check for the balance of your checking account and send it to them if you'd never met them. That kind of thing was so far out of the blue, seniors wouldn't really fall for it, right? Because there would be a whole laundry list. They'd have to go down to the bank. There were a whole bunch of other steps that were built in. Nowadays, that trusting attitude, that love of people, that sense of community and society can be smashed by a very clever person who very much can persuade a senior, especially somebody with mild cognitive decline, on doing some things that we would consider really off and different, but, helping out a cause. Hi, did you see online? And seniors watch a lot of TV, right? So, hey, did you see the recent disasters in North Carolina? Well, my name is Greg, and I represent an organization in Ashdale, North Carolina, and we're looking for individuals to help us out. We're raising, through our church, we're raising funds related to this, blah, 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 right? Pull at the heartstrings, pull at the desire to help, etc. We know from tons of research and tons of media articles that you've seen and we've all read that seniors are more vulnerable to this type of crime, and especially vulnerable online to cybercrime, to simply pressing attachments, to following instructions that are in emails. It's part of their life training. It's how everybody operated. You got instructions and you did it. Right? So when an email says, just click on here to verify your banking details, obviously that would be a normal thing to do and it wouldn't pose any issue. So I'm not saying seniors are dumb, okay? And a lot of cognitively squared away seniors are probably about ready to punch this audio speaker right now. What I'm saying is that the data shows that the vast majority of cyber crime is against seniors. So how do you set up yourself and your senior friends for cybercrime? So a lot of what I'm going to say in the next couple of minutes is applicable to individuals, whether you're 30 years or not, okay? And so when we think about the government first and foremost, because everybody calls from the IRS or, the Security Division of Service Canada, we've caught your SIN number. We've all heard these ridiculous things, right? So what we did with my mother and what worked for me and what I do is I embrace digital reality, right? I signed up for my CRA, which here in Canada, and you can consider this for the country that you're in because we're downloaded in 60 plus countries around the world. My government, which is Canada Revenue Agency, which represents the Canadian government. So CRA. CRA has an online portal for individual. I have it registered for me as a human, and I have it registered for my business, Preparedness Labs Incorporated, right? I know that the only way the government of Canada is going to request information from me will be through that web portal. Everything else is a scam, because when I get a note from Revenue Canada or when I get a note from Service Canada, that's actually them. It tells me to go to the web portal. There's no link in the email, click here to go to the web portal. They don't send me that. They send me a note that says you have a new secure message in your web portal. Go. And it doesn't give me a link to click on, right? I know that the only way I'm going to get an email from CRA is through my web portal. Everything else I get that's not through the web portal, it's a scam. Full stop. I just delete it. I don't care. Service Canada, Passport Canada, whatever you want to call it. All of that disappears. It's all a scam. Unless I initiate a conversation. And let me get to that in 1 second. So I use my CRA. So everything comes through there. If I get a phone call and it says it's CRA and I just don't want to hang up and I think, maybe, because I'll tell you one instance, I actually did get a call from CRA and it turned out to be CRA. And how did I know that? When it came time to verify my identity, it was a reverse conversation. The lady said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so calling from CRA. We want to talk about your business tax return." And they really did. Is this so-and-so? And they said my name, my full legal name. Are you the director of Preparedness Labs Incorporated? This is the address of Preparedness Labs Incorporated. Did you send in a tax return on this day with this amount? Like, they gave me the information to verify that they were talking to the right person. So it was CRA. And it's only happened once in my life that they actually called me. But the reality is I restrict everything to my CRA. And if I get somebody on the phone and I just tell them, hey, listen, just for security purposes, send this through my CRA. Just send me what the information I need to do. Yeah, thanks a lot. Send it to my CRA. If they say we don't work with that system, then they're a scammer. Off you go. So I do everything through my CRA. I pay all of my business bills through my CRA. I pay my taxes through my CRA. I pay everything through that portal. It is a secure portal. It's their portal. It's not going to get compromised, and it's the only thing I deal with. And the same thing with my bank, right? Now, I'm a simplistic guy. I learned this from my grandfather, God rest his soul, an amazing human being. I just deal with one bank. Pick one. I don't care which one. I don't have accounts all over the place. Everything is at one bank for the purpose of simplicity, right? So I know when I get these texts that say my Scotia Bank debit card has been locked because of weird transactions, please click here, log in to see the details to verify it wasn't you, right? I know the idiocy of those things and they get deleted, right? Because again, my bank only speaks to me through my online secure communications portal. On the bank app, there is a communications portal, a secure communications device or option in there. And that's how I communicate chats and questions to my bank. It doesn't come via email. Now, I get statements via email. I get something from my bank saying your line of credit statement is ready to go. Check on the app. No link to click, right? No problem. So what I'm simply saying through that bit of a rant is, however you set up your banking and however you set up your government of Canada, you have the option of only going through secure web portals through apps or online addresses that are secure, and they only talk to you that way. Remember, it's a very simple thing to train people. I never click on a link on anybody's app, on anybody's email. I don't care who you are. I don't click on the link ever, period. So don't send one to me, right? It's just good life habit. Nothing, no click, no attachment, nothing gets clicked on. So if you send me, hey, I got a great business plan, click on the link. I'm not reading your business plan because I'm not opening the attachment. Because why? Because I've read enough stories about people getting scammed. Now listen, when you're consideration for seniors, if you're taking care of a senior, God love you, wonderful opportunity. If you're taking care of a senior You need to figure out what that risk profile is. And what we did, what worked for our family is my brother doesn't live anywhere near my mother. Actually, he lives further away. But he persuaded my mother, and successfully so, and rightfully so, to be power of attorney on the accounts. What that gave him the ability to do is he goes in and verifies pretty much every day that my mother's not been a victim of a scam, that somebody hasn't phoned her up and persuaded her to do something, right? Basically, my mother, she doesn't have a lot of money like most seniors, but she does have a little bit of coin in. So because of it, we're very protective of it, not because we want the money. It's because she is highly susceptible to online threats, online cybercrime, etc. So we put a bit of a mitigation in, but that's always going to be your gut call, right? There's no right answer for this, and there's no wrong answer. It's about you looking at the senior for which you're taking care of, and looking at the threat profile, their exposure to possible cybercrime, their exposure to possible telephone crime, and then looking at how do you mitigate their accounts against being a victim to this, and having suspects try to leverage their trust, their love, their loyalty, and their sense of trust in the human animal, for lack of a better term. I mean, really, it's a gut check. There's no magic formula to it, but you really need to understand how to protect your financial identity and your financial resources from online crime. I'm 54 years old. As for now, most would say I'm cognitively all there, and I take these measures. I personally deal with my bank through the app. That's it, no other way. And I deal with my government CRA, my Canadian Government Taxation Services, through their online web portal. And as a veteran, I do the same thing for Veterans Affairs Canada. All of my relationships and conversations through Veterans Affairs are through the secure portal. Again, everything else is noise. I just delete it. Every other text I get, I just delete it. I just don't pay any attention. It doesn't bother me. Off you go. Nice try, big fella. I don't try to go this whole report scam stuff, whatever. I just delete it, right? I wish that we had a filter to put on our texting devices, whatever you want to call them. So my iMessage, I want to put a filter on there that says, if you're not in my contacts, your text message delivery fails. Full stop. Right? So if you're not one of the contacts, which means I haven't created you as a person I'm interested in, then if you try to text me, it simply goes dans la poubelle, as we say en français. And the same thing with email. If I have not given you permission through signing up and offering my email, and you're not in my contacts, then by default, you go dans la poubelle, right? Full stop. Into the spam folder, off you go. Email's a little bit easier to do that, but I'd really like for, in the modern age, the texting services to be able to put that filter on that says, if you're not in this very small group of people, humans on this earth that I want to talk to, you can't text me, even if you have my number. And oh, by the way, if you try to call me, you're going dans la poubelle as well, right? Full stop. I only want these group of people to talk to me, and everybody else in the world can go pound salt. I couldn't care less. Ideally, that's what I'd like to have. Haven't quite figured it out yet, but there we are. So when you think about the cyber exposure and that kind of telephone exposure, and you secure seniors against that, you really put a protective layer around them. And it's a lot of times in a facilitation. And a couple of times we've had the conversation in my family about reminding my mother that we are not trying to take her money. We are not trying to seize her assets. Those, again, I know some children of seniors will try to do that. I need to protect mom from doing dumb things with her money so that I get it, blah, blah, blah. But we're really just making sure that we do whatever we can to insulate her against the real world that exists out there and the world of cybercrime. But really, when you think about the myriad of things that could happen to your senior, where they live, or you as a senior, it's really about following preparedness. And preparedness is all about future proofing, thinking about the things that may happen to you and that how you may get around. Like, for example, And one thing, and I'll close with this idea of, we talk a lot about it, and we have a couple of chapters actually in our online video course about exposure to and dependency on critical infrastructure. So as a senior, if you don't drive anymore and you use public transit, that becomes a very important thing. How are you intending to be mobile and get to where you need to be? Medical appointments, doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, whatever they may be. How do you intend to do that when you can't take public transit? That's a really real question that needs to be thought through, et cetera. And then when you look at the 10 sectors of critical infrastructure, and you look at it through the exposure of a senior to those, it's a different consideration than somebody with full cognitive, full mental health, and, everybody that has 100% of their faculties have no mobility concerns, no other concerns whatsoever. Listen, I know some very robust 75-year-olds that are in better shape than I am in some degree and are very mobile and have no issues whatsoever. But I also know a great number that have these considerations or have a number of appointments they have to get to, and they're very much dependent on an external service to do that for them. So it's about thinking through the 10 sectors of critical infrastructure. Here in Canada, they're available online. In the United States of America, there are 16 of them. There's a move afoot to change the nomenclature to lifelines. I don't care. Figure it out. The point being is that you just look at each one of those through the lens of the senior and ask yourself, what does my world look like when I lose access to one of those sectors of critical infrastructure? If I'm living in an apartment and I'm 75 years old, should I have a couple of days of extra food in case I'm not feeling well and can't get to the grocery store? Because tea and toast, as much as we joke about it, is not a nutritionally dense diet, right? So maybe there's a consideration because of the senior, where they live, how they normally shop, that maybe a couple extra days of food would be helpful. You start to see, as you examine the 10 sectors of critical infrastructure, that there are some additional considerations specific to the situation you're in as a senior, or the situation your senior you're taking care of is in, that is going to be very specific to them and how they choose their lives. So understanding this, the big lesson about preparedness for seniors is each individual senior, as they get to an age where they start to have some type of impact from aging to how they live, are going to have specific considerations. It's about first investigating and understanding those considerations, and then figuring out within the realm of the possible, what are the mitigations that can be done to protect to the best extent possible against additional injury or additional harm due to things that might not normally cause an individual harm, but are now something of consideration because of their age. Hopefully that's helpful to you. We've got some information over at preparedness.ca. And again, if you've got any feedback on this episode or any other episodes, please do me a favor, drop over to www.insidemycanoehead.ca. Tell us all about us. Tell us what we need to do to make this better for you, more informative. It's free. It always will be. This is our community service to pass on the preparedness message across the world. 60 plus nations, approaching 25,000 downloads, and over 300 episodes. We have it. It's in the library. Have a look. If you don't see it, ask a question. We can direct you, or we can record a new episode just on your behalf. So thank you very much for joining us. Take care and stay safe.